stuff we can actually use, stoicism we can use, right? That's kind of what this is about. I mean, the idea for this is let's get together and talk to each other, about sort of the practical elements of our stoicism. But I want trusted voices, right? So that's why the presentations are all, folks that we know are academically rigorous and people who've thought about this well, because there's a lot of bad voices in this space at the moment, and we don't need to do that.
I don't know if I've thought about it well. I've thought about it for a long time, so that's good enough. That's close enough. I mean, it gets easy. What makes it easy is, I don't even have to use AI to generate the things I say, because I've been doing this for such a long time now. I benefit from just talking to lots of people. So sure. Over the years, I think I've had a chance just to hear from a lot of people about how they use stoicism and stuff. And so that gives me an idea of what might be helpful and what might not.
I think that's true. And, you have, I think, also the advantage of being a gifted writer. And, you write a lot. And there's just a wealth of material out there. So you're not the cat that needs to go out and get someone to kind of help them figure that part out. You do this naturally. And I think that's useful. I mean, it's useful not just to you.
Try really hard.
Yeah.
I was gifted. I think I just try really hard. No, I think the main advantage I've got is having spoken to a lot of different people over the years. So that helps.
Okay, so we're on the hour now, and we have people showing up. Somewhere there's a number, right? We're at 88. My guess is we'll hit 125, 150, something like that is probably where we'll be. But look at this, and I think if we look on the screen here, I know all of you see something different. By the way, I can't force order for everybody because there's just too many people on the call. But if I look down on the screen, I think we should count Giles Stevenson as 2, because there's 2 people on his screen right there, right? So it's not just 1, it's 2. So we'll do that thing. Anyway, it is.
Everyone's brought their pets.
Did any? Well, you know what? My wife has stayed around to take care of my pet so that the pet doesn't become part of the conversation.
Sometimes my cat comes in.
Yeah, your cat comes in, but your cat's pretty quiet. My cat knocks over my microphone, my camera, all of that kind of stuff. Those are things I'm trying not to have done here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Conversations with Modern Stoicism. I am your host, Phil Yanov. By the way, I have a thing for this. Hold on, wait.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Phil Yanov.
That's it. That's the last hurrah that I get out of this. Welcome. It's lovely to see you. And my pal Donald Robertson is here. I think we're good on that regard. And of course, we still see people showing up, which is exactly what we're here to do. You're here for the conversations. Let's just do a thing first. If this is the 3rd time we've run this event, so this could be your first time, your second time, or your 3rd time attending. Just type the number down inside the chat to kind of let us know. Have you been here before? Is this your first one, your second one, your 3rd one? Boom! Look at this: 1s and 2s and 3s. I like. By the way, even. Once you get to number 2, you've achieved a special badge at Conversations with Modern Stoicism. We call you a repeat offender. So we're lucky to have you, glad to have you show up here more than once. Let's try this thing with the slides here. I think this is going to work. Another thing that you could do is go ahead and grab your fingers and tell us, I like this, Stoic recidivist. I'm all about that. Go ahead and, already. Hello from Latvia, first, second badge. Yes. Northern Virginia, Bristol, UK. Tell us where in the world you are and just stick that.
Anyone in Canada?
And are there anybody here?
Anyone in Canada?
I know that there are, by the way. Canada is our 3rd best country represented in the number of tickets that we put out. So, of course, it's US, the UK, and then Canada. I see a Toronto. They're flying by, Donald.
Toronto doesn't count. If you're in Montreal. Like I'm a former Torontonian, but
Yeah,
I'm joking. Toronto counts.
I know it counts. All right.
Occasionally we get people from Nova Scotia.
There's a Nova Scotia right there. Is that what you were saying? Popped right in there.
There you go.
But I remember this from last time because my friends always tell me that Nova Scotia is the only new place that looks like the old place. It looks like Scotland. I guess you probably, yeah. You having been from one and to the other, yeah. All right, so let's see. Dublin, Vienna, Austria, Nova Scotia, Arlington, Virginia, New York, first time, lovely to see you. Buenos Aires, Argentina. Donald and I have a pal that lives down in Buenos Aires. All right, and I hear people gleeping in, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that sound off, and you can't hear it. Can you hear it? Just me? Yeah, I hear the doorbell. Actually, I guess Donald hears the doorbell too. Because you're a co-host. You're a co-host.
It's good. It means that lots of people are coming along, and we're all going to do the dance of Stoicism together.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're doing that thing. I see. And you said dance. That made me think of a question that I've got for Donald Robertson in particular that I've been holding on to for a while. But let's do this thing. So here we are. We're doing conversations with modern Stoicism, and what are we going to do here today? And this is exactly the agenda. I'm trying to give you a little bit of wayfinding because some of you have been here before and some of you not been here, and you don't maybe necessarily know your way around. So my thing is to kind of get you introduced first, of course, to Donald and to me, to kind of let you know that we're here and we're representing modern Stoicism. And one of the things we want to do is to get you talking to each other. So what we've decided, we've come up with this program format, which allows us to get you all together. And right now we've got, looks like 135 or so folks on the call. And what we're going to do is have Donald give a short presentation, 10 to 15 minutes long. Listen, he'd like to have longer, and he can talk longer, and it's awesome. But we want it to be short enough so that we don't lose you, so that we can then move you over into these small group settings so that you can talk to each other. And that's what we're kind of here about. And what we'll do is we're going to give you an anchoring question to go inside there. And then you'll go in and into these breakout rooms, which are small rooms, and talk to each other for a little bit. Then we'll come back out and we'll talk about that as well. And we'll have a little bit of follow-up discussion, and then we'll do it a second time. So and I thank Scott for saying April was a fun meeting. I think this is kind of a nice thing to see everybody. So let's get you oriented just a little bit. One of the things is that we are people and we're going to be talking to each other. One of the things that you could do to make this easy for everybody else is if your Zoom does not have your name on it, and you're in gallery view, you should be able to reach right over to the three dots next to your face, slide down, hit the word rename, and put your name in that space. Now you can put other things there if you want. Try not to sell me anything, but it's so much easier than having just iPad user or whatever, because later we're going to throw you into breakout rooms, and it's just going to be nice to have a name to call you. So that's our kind of thing, is to let you know, if you go ahead and name yourself on the Zoom. By the way, another thing that's kind of fun, I think we're kind of popped up here mostly. We have for folks who like what we're doing here, enjoy these conversations, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. We have a WhatsApp group that we're using to kind of just have keep the conversation going between events. And I wonder how many of you here are already in the WhatsApp group. If you are, just type WhatsApp in the chat and let people know that, because there's 50 or so people, I think, that are inside the WhatsApp already. So you can see some of these names go by of folks who are already in our WhatsApp. And I would think that they probably wouldn't type this in the list if they weren't kind of happy with the conversation that keeps going. If you're the kind of person, by the way, who would like to do that with us. So if you decide that you want to be part of that, you can jump in on the WhatsApp group as well. Okay, so name yourself. We are here to be good cats, nice to each other. And of course, we're here to hear from our pal, Donald Robertson. Let's, I had another question for you to kind of get you involved in this conversation. How about just a quick little, have you had a chance to practice Stoicism in the previous week? I guess you would just type in yes or no. No, I've not been Stoic. I don't know. Donald's going to give you some great ideas on how to do this, by the way. I have been, things make me cranky. And so I need to use Stoicism to kind of make me a better human being. So,
life is difficult. Life is warfare, Phil.
It feels that way to Donald. It really does.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of the last. Doing DIY is pretty much a good test. Never mind contemplating your own death, just kind of like repairing stuff around the house, I find is a pretty good
Having
test.
stuff break, I think, has been a good one. In fact, I posted in one of our groups just recently, I dropped a cutting board that I really enjoyed using in the kitchen. I dropped a bamboo cutting board and it, of course, shattered into flinders when it hit the floor. And I said, I looked at it and I looked down and I said, I knew you were going to break. And I guess today was the day. And I picked up the pieces, threw it in the trash, and I avoided all of the cursing that I normally involved, when I drop things and I really kind of liked them and I wanted them to stay. But I don't kiss my kids yet and tell them, well, you might not be here tomorrow. But but I do
Practice that on the cat.
Yeah. Well, listen, I invite the cat to find other lodgings almost every day. So it's pretty easy. Okay, so we got that. Donald, you said this is something interesting, and I know I'm going to introduce you here in just a second. But one of the things, I know you said life is warfare, but I know a thing that people don't know about you probably is that in addition to being a cognitive behavioral therapist and writing all these books, and we're going to talk about that in a second, but you were engaged in some form of martial arts at some point, because I've seen pictures of you.
Weirdly, I thought you were going to ask me about that. Not really. A really long time ago.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I did
Yeah.
taekwondo. That was a really long time ago.
Yeah.
And I did a little bit of jiu-jitsu and stuff. But that was 3 decades ago or something. Or more. That was a long time ago, Phil. That was in Scotland.
Is that right? I didn't know if that was a thing that you kept going, or was the thing you it sounds like you kind of let it go.
Any good stories about that? But
you went into
that was when I was a kid, I was into meditation and things like that. And I think it was partly because I was I got interested in martial arts. That kind of got me interested in reading books of meditation and stuff. I remember reading The Tao of Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee. My friend gave me a copy of it, and that kind of got me thinking about Taoism and stuff. And then after that, I went and did a degree in philosophy. So maybe that was kind of how I got started, becoming interested in these things. Yeah.
You have some other trigger event though. When people ask you how you got involved with Stoicism, what is your initial event?
Gosh, I mean, there's different ways that I could interpret it. I think one of the things was my father passed away when I was pretty young, when I was like 14, and he was into Freemasonry. Like everybody was into Freemasonry in the town in Scotland. Like all my friends' fathers were Freemasons. And he left some books behind, and I read them, and they mentioned Plato and Pythagoras and stuff. And so I started reading books about things like that. And I read books about Gnosticism. I started reading about world religions. I read books about the Kabbalah and Christian mysticism for some reason. And all these things that I think because my father's interested in Freemasonry. And then from reading all the stuff about Gnosticism, here's a bit of trivia for you. The Gnostic codices they found in Chernobskian in the 1940s, early Christian, like 2nd, 3rd century AD Christian texts had inside them an excerpt from Plato's Republic, featuring obviously Socrates. So Socrates was in a version of the Bible, like in a parallel universe. Socrates would have been in the Bible. How weird is that?
It is pretty weird.
So I read that. I was like,
they probably actually required them to read that in Hebrew school or something.
Where?
They had like everyone else, they were required to read Plato's Republic. So someone just copied it forward. And
oh, you think they were like, you have to read this?
Yeah, it's good. It's
pretty
good.
Long, and they just had an excerpt from it, so they kind of got off lightly.
Didn't we all do that though? The excerpts it's the best way to go after.
Yeah. So I went and did a degree in philosophy at Aberdeen University, and then I became a psychotherapist. Right.
Yeah, and I knew that bit of it. Okay. listen, audience, are we ready to hear from Donald Robertson? Give me nods up and down, or you can give me thumbs up or dance move or something like that. Yeah, we're ready to hear from Donald Robertson. All right. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to introduce Donald. And by the way, so when Donald's talking, if you have questions or something that amplifies or helps the speaker, please stick that inside the chat. Let's try not to have sidebar discussions in that part because people find that kind of distracting. But if you've got a question that we could use in the Q&A, we're going to do a little group Q&A right at the end, then please do stick that inside the chat. Other than that, let's get ready for Donald. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Donald Robertson. Donald is a Scottish author and cognitive behavioral therapist who currently lives in Montreal. He's been writing and talking about Stoicism for nearly 25 years. He's one of the founding members of the Modern Stoicism nonprofit, my colleague there, and the founder and president of Plato's Academy Center, a nonprofit based in Athens, Greece. Donald is the author of 7 books on philosophy and psychotherapy, including his best-known book, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, which has now roughly sold 250,000 copies. He's been translated into about 20 languages. His latest publication is a biography for Yale University Press's Ancient Lives series titled Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic Emperor. He's also currently working on a book about Socrates. Donald is a leading expert on Stoicism and its applications to modern life. He is passionate about helping people to live more fulfilling and meaningful lives through the practice of Stoicism. He is a gifted communicator, and his talks are always engaging and informative. I know that I like him, which is why I invited him here. I am confident that you are going to enjoy his presentation today. And as the kids say on TikTok, here is a Scottish flaming hot skillet of Stoicism, Donald Robertson.
I don't think anyone's ever said that, Phil. What if
I saw it this morning on TikTok. My wife showed me. I said, I'm using that for Donald.
What if this is rubbish now? Like, that was such a big build-up. Like, I feel a lot of responsibility now. So will I throw up my slides?
Yeah, have at it.
Let's do it. Okay, so what can Stoicism teach us about self-improvement psychology? Right? I guess that's what a lot of you are interested in. And I guess it's something that I can talk about. So let's get to it. So I'll say a little bit about who I am, not very much because Phil's kind of done that. I'll talk a little bit about Stoicism and cognitive therapy. Could talk all day about that, but I'll keep it short and sweet. Because I want to get to the last part, which is like, how can you actually apply this in day-to-day life? So I'll talk about what I call cognitive distancing. I'll talk about what you call premeditatio malorum. And then we'll talk about the Stoic virtues. If we have time, I'll check in with Phil and see how we're doing for time. Like, mainly I want to do a little bit of a deep dive about some practical stuff. So I'll mainly focus on those first 2 practical things. And then we'll see if we have a little bit of extra time. Maybe we can do other stuff. Who am I? You've heard all that. Like, these are some books. There you go. Right, let's get serious. Stoicism and cognitive therapy. Albert Ellis was a psychoanalyst who jumped ship in the 1950s in New York. He was based. He became one of the founders of cognitive behavioral therapy, or as he called it, rational emotive behavior therapy, or originally rational therapy. He wrote, many of the principles incorporated in the theory of rational emotive psychotherapy are not new. Some of them were originally stated several thousand years ago, especially by the Greek and Roman Stoic philosophers. And he says this over and over and over again throughout his many writings. Aaron T. Beck, who's the most famous pioneer of cognitive psychotherapy, said the philosophical origins, so maybe that's the kind of key phrase that I tend to take out, of cognitive therapy can be traced back to Stoic philosophers. So the philosophical origins, or the main philosophical influence on early cognitive behavioral therapy, was Stoicism. Like, how about that? And the most important thing that connects them is what I would call, for simplicity's sake, the cognitive model of emotion. So this is the foundation. I know when I teach stuff, people are like, not theory, but you need a little bit of theory to lay the foundations of the practice. And it's only a very little bit. We keep it pretty minimal when teaching it to clients and things usually. So Albert Ellis said, the truths of Stoicism were perhaps best set forth by Epictetus, who in the 1st century AD wrote in the Enchiridion, Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. Now, you've heard that, but cognitive therapists and psychotherapists hadn't heard it in the 1950s. And Ellis put this in almost every book he wrote, and he wrote a lot of books. He says he taught it to every client, and he taught it to all of his many students. So it became a cliche in cognitive therapy. Ellis came out with, we'd call this now a conceptualization model in cognitive therapy. He had a very basic model. He called it the ABC model, partly because, like children's building blocks, he said, this is the simplest way I can articulate what the foundations of cognitive therapy are. So when therapists work with clients, if they're evidence-based, they have to take a lot of really state-of-the-art, sophisticated statistical research and then distill it into some simple diagrams and observations that anyone could understand, because their clients are not necessarily scientists or researchers, but they need to understand what they're doing. So Ellis said, most people think in stimulus response terms. That guy called me a name and it made me cry, right? So Ellis called this the activation, beliefs, consequences, or ABC model. Activation or trigger, as a guy called me a name. The consequences, I burst into tears. Ellis said most people miss out the middle part, which is that our beliefs, aka our cognitions, mediate our response. So, and the clue is that the same guy might have called someone else the same name, and they didn't burst into tears. They just laughed in his face. So what's the difference between them and me? Like, we have different consequences. Ellis said the difference is hidden from view in your beliefs, the cognitions that mediate your emotional response. Where did he get that idea from? He stole it from Epictetus, or actually he acknowledged the debt. And from this cognitive model originate many cognitive therapy techniques. Now, I'll make it pretty clear here by putting a big red sign across the top. I think there's a lot of bad self-improvement advice on the internet, from self-improvement influencers, I would call them. And some of them refer to Stoicism. Here's a video by Andrew Tate talking about Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism. I'm not sure this guy's ever read Marcus Aurelius, to be honest. However, more importantly, the advice that he gives is based on a kind of naive model of emotion. So if you're angry or upset, you should either suppress those feelings or you should vent them and get them out of your system in the gym or something like that. But he doesn't at any point acknowledge that your anger towards other people might be caused by your attitudes, beliefs, and values, and you might want to question those philosophically. Like, so that's why this foundation stone of the cognitive theory is so important. It's a fork in the road that differentiates Stoicism and cognitive therapy from bad self-improvement advice, which is, I say bad because it's not telling you what would be useful, and sometimes it's actually telling you things that we know can be unhelpful, or even in some cases, harmful forms of emotional coping. So there's interpretations of Stoicism out there that miss the most important point, the central point, and that changes everything and leads them to give kind of shonky psychological advice. So let's look at the most obvious consequence of this theory, I think. We don't have a name for this in English, but in cognitive therapy, we make up this neologism called cognitive distancing. Beck thought that this was an essential precursor of doing cognitive therapy. You have to do this first in order to be able to do cognitive therapy. We now believe in the third wave of research that this is much more important than people previously assumed, and it's almost an entire therapy in itself. It's one of the most robust, flexible strategies in the field of therapy when it's properly understood. So that's why I want to do a little bit of a deep dive in it. This idea of cognitive distancing is implicit in that famous passage, funnily enough, from Epictetus. It's not things that upset us, but rather our opinions about it. It's about separating. Cognitive distancing refers to the distance between your beliefs, values, or attitudes and the things to which they refer. Beck said, think of it this way. He used a really cool little analogy. He said, imagine that you're wearing coloured spectacles. They're blue. And so you think that house is blue, that person is blue, my cat is blue, Phil Yanov is blue. And then you're so used to wearing them that you fuse it with reality. You think that blue is in the external events. And then one day you take those glasses off, they get knocked off your face. And suddenly you see things as they really are. And you realize, geez, Phil Yanov isn't blue. And my cat's not blue. And that house isn't blue. It's the glasses, the lenses were blue all along. Well, imagine you're wearing catastrophic colored glasses, or other strong emotional judgments that color your perception of the world. You think this is a catastrophe. That guy's a jerk. This is awful. But those are all values that you're projecting onto the world. Now, the trap is we think those are qualities of the world rather than realizing it's an activity that we're engaged in. It's coming from inside us, the awfulness, or the desirability of certain things. We naturally fuse these judgments with external events. So the distancing is learning to look at our beliefs rather than looking through them and allowing them to color our perception of reality. If you can gain that distance or separation between the beliefs and the external events, it tends to do two main things, very simply. It tends to dilute the intensity of your emotional reaction, but it does something more subtle, but I think more important. It increases cognitive flexibility. So it means that you'll be better at problem solving and coming up with other ways of coping with situations. You'll think more clearly about events. In Stoicism, as I said, this is implicit in Epictetus's statement. It's not things that upset us, but rather our opinions about them. Marcus Aurelius quotes that. He several times paraphrases it. It's a theme that runs throughout the whole of the discourses. It's central to Stoicism. It's a foundation stone of the psychology of ancient Stoicism, and it's central to modern cognitive therapy. It's easy to say those words, but if you continually realize that, if you continually realize that it's your glasses that are blue, not Phil Yanov that's blue, then you'll prevent yourself from being mesmerized by your own emotions. Epictetus also says things like, he says, when you have a troubling impression, like when you get angry, like Andrew Tate is all the time, you say to yourself, you're just an impression to the anger, the angry thoughts, and not at all the thing you claim to represent. That is cognitive distancing. He's saying you're a thought, you're the map, not the territory. You're a thought, not a fact. He's separating the impression from the thing that it claims to represent. That's a perfect expression of cognitive. This guy really knows what this is, even though in English we don't have an expression for it. We have to make up a technical term to describe it. Freud had no idea what this was. Jung had no idea what this was. They didn't, honestly, trust me. They had similar ideas, but they didn't really grasp this concept. That's why cognitive therapy had to evolve. Epictetus wants us to monitor this constantly through a process that he calls prosoche, or continual attention in Greek, prosoche, to our own value judgments. All right, this is where we're getting serious, some practical stuff. How do we do this in therapy? We used to do it in quite simple ways. There were a few techniques. Now there's a bunch of techniques, and some of them have been directly researched. So these are things we'd actually do with clients. The Stoics don't necessarily do these things. Maybe they did some things that resembled some of them, but the quotes from Epictetus previously are good enough to show that the Stoics understood this concept, and they would have been able to relate to some of these techniques. So we can do this through changing the words, changing the distance, or changing the speed in relation to our thoughts. So if I want to gain cognitive distance, I might say to myself, this is just a thought that's upsetting me and not the thing itself. Like Epictetus, I might tell myself, this is just a thought. If I go, nobody likes me, everybody hates me, I might go, I notice right now that Donald is telling himself, nobody likes me, everybody hates me. I call this apostrophizing. We're talking to the thoughts. We're putting the thoughts in quotation marks to our own thoughts. We're looking at them as if they were someone else's thoughts. Or it's like I'm taking a step to one side and observing myself having these thoughts. It's like I'm taking the glasses off and looking at the glasses, I notice right now that Donald is telling himself, like, this is a disaster. Like, so by phrasing it in this way, using these formulaic statements, similar to some of the things the Stoics do, that we can train clients to gain cognitive distance, but it has to be a regular thing. You have to practice it quite consistently. There's also little physical distance techniques that we can use. So I might hold, a technique that I like to do is I imagine that I'm completely absorbed in a thought. Nobody likes me, everybody hates me, nobody likes me, everybody hates me. And I'm putting my hands over my eyes and imagine that I'm really engrossed in that thought and really close to it. And then I'll open my eyes and move my hands slowly away from my face. And imagine that I'm holding the thought in my hands as if I'm taking the glasses off and holding the lenses in my hands. So I'm holding that thought, nobody likes me, everybody hates me, in my hands, and just moving it further away. So it's a couple of feet away from my face. But imagine that I'm holding the thought, like the sentences there in my hands, or written on a piece of paper, if you like, or just somehow in a more abstract way. So I imagine that the thought just being gradually further away from my head, like a couple of feet away, and then moving it closer and then moving it away again to get an experience of taking the glasses off and putting them back on again, as it were. We might train clients to do that in therapy. I might also write it down on a piece of paper, or imagine that I can see it on a wall. So emblazoned on the wall in front of me in big letters, it says, nobody likes me, everybody hates me. And I might imagine changing the font style. I might imagine shuffling the words around. I might imagine changing the color of the text. These are all ways of kind of objectifying the thought, like, so that I'm taking a step back from it. I can walk around it and look at it from different angles, as it were. They're psychological gimmicks that allow us to gain cognitive distance. And finally, I can change the speed that I'm having the thought. So I could worry in slow motion. I might go, nobody likes me, everybody hates me. So it becomes really disjointed. So if you are worrying about things, simply really slowing it down can force you to change your relationship. So I might become more aware of the muscles that I'm using and my throat and my lips, my breathing, the sound of my voice. These are all ways of looking at the lenses rather than looking at the world through them. Or one of my favorite techniques, no one ever uses this for self-improvement, but we use it a lot in clinical practice, and there's direct experimental evidence showing its effects. This technique was discovered by a psychologist called Titchener about 100 years ago, but the implications of it were only understood a few decades ago. We call it word repetition. So simply you'd repeat a phrase as quickly as you can and we believe now from research that the optimum period of time is 45 seconds. It's used in a state-of-the-art therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. So I'd say, nobody likes me, everybody hates me, 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 nobody likes me, everybody hates me. Now that's kind of annoying if you do it for 5 seconds. You imagine doing it for 45 seconds, it feels like a marathon. By the end of it, your lips will have turned to rubber. But when you repeat that statement, you can still have the thought, but you feel kind of strangely detached from it because you're now hyper aware of the process of having the thought. It seems laborious to say those things to yourself. So it's like you're taking the glasses off and put them on again so many times, you're like now hyper aware of the fact that they're sitting on your face. And it's being aware of something that normally becomes invisible to us that gives us cognitive distance. This technique in itself, I really believe this alone can transform many people's emotional lives. I mean, out of the 101 things we could teach people, this is, and it's interesting that we don't have a word for it. It's a knack. Some people get it immediately. Some people take a bit of coaching to get it. If you can get it, it's one of the most powerful and versatile psychological self-improvement techniques.
Time.
How are we doing for time, Phil?
We're out.
We're out of time.
You're at 16 minutes.
Oh, man. I've got too much information to impart. Well,
how about we take this piece here and we use this for the second question, and we'll just let you introduce it when we do the second question.
Okay, cool.
Does that work for you?
Yeah. We're back. Cool. Well, at least I got to talk about the most important part.
What was the most important part? I thought it was the foundation. It was so much material. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm glad I'm recording this because I want to go back and listen to it again.
But there's a lot. I mean, right, I'll complain about something for a minute. I'll be like, it's very unstoic. Well, I'll not complain about it, but
sure.
So it's just something that I observe that I find a bit odd. When we started doing modern Stoicism, which was like, whatever, 12 years ago or something like that now, it was I and Tim LeBon and Chris Gill and John Sellers and Jules Evans and some other people. And we met in Exeter in England. And there's even a video of a meeting on the internet. And we kind of planned Stoic Week. And we based it around cognitive behavioral therapy. And we thought, man, people are going to use Stoicism for self-help. And there's so many psychological techniques in it. And then Stoicism as a form of self-help exploded. And it became a big phenomenon. Even people like Andrew Tate, are kind of getting on it and stuff. But what surprised me is all the books that come out about it, none of them ever really mention much about the psychological techniques that are in Stoicism. They talk a lot about Stoicism as self-improvement, but they're often really vague about how you would put it into practice. Whereas right at the very beginning, we said there's loads that we can take, many analogies that we can make between things we know in modern psychology. So I was disappointed that the self-help books that were coming out didn't say more about these kind of practical aspects of Stoicism. It fell by the wayside, paradoxically. So I think if people just take away this idea of cognitive distancing, that I think would be really gold dust. And then there's 101 other aspects of Stoicism that,
I agree. And I think you're bringing, you bring that particular voice to it. I know it's you and Tim LeBon and there are others, but in this spot of saying, I want Stoicism and cognitive behavioral therapy to kind of dovetail into helping people live better lives and be better human beings, I'm all for that. And, I think that's a message that kind of resonates with me and seems to resonate with the audience as well. So we ask, I know there was some stuff about the chat. I'll talk to you more in the future about how you can deal with the chat, because I think that's really a you thing in terms of how you want to see the chat for you. But if you have questions for Donald, normally we do 2 or 3 group questions here before I take you and stick you into a group chat. Donald, there was a quick question here, and this is one I see a lot. I mean, you can, if you saw something in the chat you want to pick as a question, do that as well. But there was a quick question. We get this a lot. A lot of people seem to think that there's some connection between Buddhist practices and Stoicism, and it's a pretty tenuous connection, but I thought you might have something you wanted to talk about on that.
The problem for me, the challenge for me, Phil, is I could talk all day about some of these things. So I studied history of Indian philosophy at university, side note, right, as part of my philosophy degree. The Buddhism consists of many different traditions. It's very complex, and there's a lot of variation between different forms of Buddhism. So in the West, we tend to have quite a simplistic idea of what Buddhism is. It doesn't necessarily map onto the real Buddhist tradition, where we usually have a kind of westernized idea of Buddhism. However, the short answer is there was some communication between ancient Greece. We believe the most likely candidate is Greek skepticism that may have had some kind of connection with Buddhism or related Indian traditions. The Greeks called Indian sages the gymnosophoi, or naked wise men. There's even a tradition that Socrates, a late anecdote from a later author saying that Socrates met an Indian merchant and talked with him about Indian philosophy. Marcus Aurelius had a friend. His Greek secretary, if I remember rightly, was said to have spoken to the gymnosophoi and traveled widely. So there may be some historical communication, but certainly in Buddhism, you get this idea of mindfulness that's very similar to prosoche, I believe, in Stoicism, although some people disagree with that. The aim of Buddhism, if a modern Western Buddhist was to talk to Cicero, Cicero would say, in a nutshell, what's the telos of what you do, right? What's the goal of life? and they would say it's nirvana, which
Right.
is the cessation of suffering. And Cicero would say that sounds more like Epicureanism, or it sounds maybe like Greek skepticism, perhaps. It sounds like ataraxia, and that's kind of different from the goal of Stoicism, which is a more active and more cognitive goal, which we call arete,
Right.
moral wisdom. So I think the ancient Greeks and Romans would have seen a subtle but important difference in the fundamental goal of Buddhism and Stoicism. That said, there are many different forms of Buddhism. So that was my best short answer.
Yeah, no, and that's great. I did not know that part about your education. I think that's fascinating. The thing is, there are some good ideas that pop up again and again. And again, like you said, the telos of these is different, but clearly some of these ideas make sense. And so we kind of came back to that.
A lot of similarities, but we see similarities between everything that's not us.
I see a face in the moon. So
yeah, if we look at ancient we go all these ancient philosophies are saying the same things is something that you'll hear people say. Well, just because they're all different from us, right? But once you look at them more closely, they're different from each other as well. They're not all identical.
Oh, right. And yes, and the Stoics and the Epicureans and the skeptics, and they could sit and fight for days about the differences between and Cicero wrote about this at length, right? So we can read about all of that. And the only thing we don't have is we don't have the Buddhists, showing up in the agora, arguing with these guys, because then we'd have known exactly what the differences were, because they'd have argued about it and written all about it at the time.
Yeah, that was
all right. I love this. All right. Here's the thing. We're here to get this audience the opportunity to talk to each other and for them to meet with each other. We've got about 150 people on the call, it looks like, at this moment. But what we do is we take them now and we take some of these ideas that you have spread, and we use one of these as a conversation starter inside of a small group setting. So let me talk about a few things that are going to happen here. All right, this thing we call breakout rooms, right? So we're going to, I know if you don't do this a lot, this might feel a little different, a little weird to you, but we're just going to try this. So what I'll do is, you don't have to worry about finding a room or anything like that. I will randomly shuffle you and toss you into a room with a small number of people. Small is probably 5 people, but I'll check. It kind of depends on the math and how this works out and what I think is going to work. I see, but here, a couple of things for you. First, this works best. Screen on, sound on, microphone, all that kind of stuff, because you're going to be in a room, a small setting with just a bunch of people, right? So for example, if I put you, let's imagine that you were in someone's living room and you had just say 5 people there, you would not show up with a bag over your head. That's the way it is when you have your camera turned off in this, right? Because someone's like, well, I don't know, should I talk to this person? Should I not talk to this person? What kind of person? Basically, we're trying to build trust. So do that. So I'm going to put you in a room that's randomly assigned. We need for you to think, okay, I'm willing to explore this and kind of learn and see what this is like, and I'll get to meet some other people. We're going to put you in there with a question, and I'm going to give you the question right now so you can begin to think about an answer for that. I stuck it in the chat, and that way the chat will have that forward with you, right? So it's not things that upset us, but rather our opinions about them. And as Donald always says, what are the pros and cons? And if you could imagine, if you think if this particular idea, it's not things that upset us, but our opinions about them, if we adopt that model for ourselves and go, this is kind of my, I realize this impression is my impression, that might work really well for us, or it might get us into trouble occasionally. And how can that be? And how does that work? So we want you to give examples. So again, go ahead, Donald. You talk about the question for a second.
All it says, there are both pros and cons. So what are they? Right.
There are pros and cons, and that's right. And we want you to figure out what those might be. we're going to put you in rooms, and I'm going to do this for 12 minutes. It's a little bit of difference than the last time we did this. I'm going to see how that works. So you're going to be in a room for 12 minutes. You're going to be in a room with 5 or 6 people, or I'm sorry, 5 or 6 people, I think. In that room, the longest hair goes first. Okay, all of you with long hair. I see Belinda. Look at this already at the top. She's going, Yes, the longest hair in the room goes first. The longest hair is then also the timekeeper. You'll see a thing at the top of the screen. It says 12 minutes. Just kind of follow it. And so if someone gets in there, Belinda, let's imagine that you're the person in your room that is the person who goes first. And you say, oh, there's 5 people here. We have 12 minutes. That means, I can go a minute and a half or something like that. And then maybe we'll have a little bit left over. Excellent. Then you just kind of time people as you go through. Okay. Belinda, are you with me? Can you give me a thumbs up? Yes. All right. Look, everybody, Belinda is with me. Are you with me with what's about to happen to you? All I need is thumbs up like this, maybe a dance move. You can do a wink, a nod, a smile. All of that will be good. All right. I'm going to put you in the room. You're going to be in the room for 12 minutes. It's a chance to meet people, but I want you to start with the question. Do not start with, hi, I'm Phil and I'm a Scorpio and I live in South Carolina, because everyone will forget that part. But if you can say, you know what, I've been thinking about this, and you give them the idea first, you begin with emotional attachment to the idea. And then people go, you know what, I like the way that Ann Cronin thinks, and I think I'd like to know more about her. So maybe we could be friends and I can introduce myself. So you do that at the end. You start with this question, stay focused on the question. If you have time left over, you introduce each other. By the way, some of you are so good at what you do. You might be coaches and all of that kind of stuff that you're going to want to coach people. Don't. This is not what we're here to do. We're just here to share our own experiences. So you're okay with me on this? One last time, thumbs up, and I'm going to open the rooms. The question, I'm going to repeat the question in here, right here. Someone asked me to repeat the question. I put it down inside the chat again. It's not things that upset us. I will put it above your screen as well, but save it inside the chat, okay? All right. One last time. I know I'm just that. Thumbs up, ready to go. 3, 2, 1. If anything goes wrong inside the room, you can't see, you can't hear, things get weird, press the leave room button. I will be out here to believe you. Poof, off you go. 12 minutes. You hit the close button, I guess. Thanks for that.
Oh, yeah.
Some people will pop right back, right off. 60 seconds, folks. 53 seconds till they come back.
I just press all these buttons. I don't read what they say.
Yeah. This is the problem of just making you co-host for this thing. I mean, the beauty is you can mute and unmute. The bad thing is you've got complete control over the call. I need like assistant co-host or something like that.
Yeah, like a deputy.
Yeah, well, I did deputize you, but you acted as plenipotentiary of the Zoom call, right? You can negotiate on my behalf. 25 seconds till everybody comes back.
That's enough time for me to go and get more coffee.
Yeah, have at it. Hello, nice people. We've just been sitting around talking. I hope, by the way, just stick a word in the chat. How did that go? Did you could see, you could hear, did you have good conversations? Did you get to meet people? Is that yes? And then poof, I think we're all back. There is a substantial delay in rejoining the call when this comes back. All right, chat was excellent, heard awesome. I want to hear some words. I wanted you to type some words inside the chat to kind of let me know. Oh, and what's kind of cool, I just noticed, I got not a completely, but a largely different group of people up on the screen. By the way, look at your screen and smile if you think you're on my screen. I could like call your names up. Well, let's not do that. But Michaela, you're here. So smile, 3, 2, 1. Just want pictures. I want pictures to know people that there are happy Stoics showing up and having good conversations. And I really apologize. Like on my screen, apparently there are 5 screens of you to be seen on my screen. And I only get to see one at a time. I see Aldo Danucci in there. Hello, Aldo. Wonderful to see. I guess let's walk through first a couple things. All right, you could see, we could hear. Happy Stoic, we are going to mark that. Room 13, Larry's already like got it. He's got a room. His room is his thing. I would love to hear someone who wants to raise their hand and maybe give me a few words about what it was like inside the room, what the conversation was like. When I say raise your hand, I mean you go down to the reactions button and you click the raise hand button under the reactions. By the way, this is also like a Zoom class. We're not just Stoics. I teach you a little bit about Zoom. There's a big raise hand button down at the bottom, and you end up with that. And I will take a few of these here to see how this works. Yeah, I see some hands coming up. Thank you for doing that. Hold on. while I do that. Everyone in the meeting. Okay, so I've got, is that Ranil and Pakaj and Anshul and James to kind of get me started. But I will take it. We may not make it to everybody, but thank you for raising hands. Feel free to raise your hand in case we do take more of these. But let's start out here. I'm going to ask Ranil. I think I might get that wrong.
You got it right, Phil.
Oh, excellent. Welcome. Talk to me about what you heard inside your room.
I think we had three of us, including myself, and the main point we all came across is Stoicism kind of helped. It started for us to help us with any kind of adversity we were having, whether it's negative self-talk or just dealing with the world. And I think a lot of us come through that way. And a few of us have been introduced to Stoicism for the last 5 to 6 years. Myself have been introduced to it since 2000, back in college days. Yeah. So it was really good to hear perspective on how it helps us deal with the externals as well as deal with our internal sort of self-talk, whether it's negative or whether it's judgmental, and it's helping us kind of look away and say, you know what, that's not always kind of correct. I'll stop there.
No, I get that. Donald, you're welcome to jump in on all of these too, by the way. You're part of this conversation. This has got to be something you hear a lot, right?
I'll unmute myself. Yeah, like I'm interested to hear what people to troubleshoot, like, and hear what cons or disadvantages or weaknesses they encounter with Stoic ideas in particular. But it's also, I think, for people to chat like this and to hear how Stoicism has benefited them. I know that it is extremely important. It's kind of social proof. And we know from research in psychology that, you know, people benefit enormously from others in their peer group telling them how they've benefited from self-improvement strategies.
Yeah, no, thank you. All right, let's go. Let's ask, is this Pankaj? I hope I said that right. And if I didn't, he'll make it right by me.
Hi. No, you got it right, Phil. Thank you.
Super.
Hello, everyone. Well, our group was very interactive. We were 4. And the very question, when things happen, how pros and cons, but we did talk about even what Donald, or the question was asked, Buddhism and Stoicism.
Yeah.
So if I may share a bit, since I come from Kathmandu, the Himalaya, where we do practice Buddhism and Hinduism. So I read somewhere that there was a Greek king, Milind, and in Buddhism, this is one of the books one has to go through, that is called Milinda Prashna, which means the questions of Milind, who was a Greek king who ruled around 140 AD or BC, I think, BC, right? So that shows he became patron to Buddhism, and it is believed that a lot of Stoic practices which evolved later was primarily, taken or influenced by Mildred, who is known in India as Milinda. So perhaps, that will be lovely hearing from Donald.
Yeah,
I
love that.
This is a famous Buddhist scripture. There's a Greek king speaking to a Buddhist monk. It's possible that Greek thought influenced certain strands of Indian intellectualism, like that were related to Buddhism. Like it's kind of difficult to really pin down, but like definitely there's opportunities. We know that a Cynic philosopher accompanied Alexander the Great. Pyrrho of Elis, the founder of skeptic philosophy, went with Alexander the Great, who got to, I think, what would be modern day Pakistan, in Bactria or Afghanistan. So, there was a time. But then, I mean, just to, by the way, explain what happened then was the Parthians got in the way. So what was the Persian Empire and then subsequently became the Parthian Empire prevented communication between the West and the East, except kind of sporadically. So there was a kind of barrier that stopped Buddhists and Greek philosophers from being able to talk to each other easily. But there's some evidence of communication. And one of the big opportunities was when Alexander the Great, it was kind of a big deal, as the name implies. got all the way to India with an army and some philosophers.
Right. No, I love it. Hey, Donald, I didn't hear cons come up, but could you do a quick on what you think some of the cons are in the space?
There
And
are
then we're going to
cons.
transition to the next. I know there are
So the
cons.
question for you, like, so there are, what are the cons? Right, we have to simplify. Cognition is not the only thing, like, that determines your emotions. And the Stoics know that, like, because they have this thing called the propathei, or which are involuntary aspects of emotional responses. So there are many other factors that determine your anger, fear, and sadness, not just your cognition. So we have to be careful that we don't put too much emphasis on one factor to the exclusion of others. So it's important. One con is that this cognitive model, like, and the concept, and therefore the technique of distancing, simplifies. So the cognitive therapist would say it focuses on the aspect that we know is one of the most important ingredients and one of the ingredients that's most under your control. But I'm drinking coffee right now, right? That if I drink enough coffee, it's going to make me more prone to anxiety, perhaps, because my heart's beating faster. And if I don't get my coffee, I might be more prone to irritability or anger. So there are basic physiological components to our emotions, which this model and this technique don't necessarily fully recognize. Also, because we don't have an English word for it, some people don't understand what cognitive distancing is, and occasionally they'll misinterpret it, and they may turn it into a form of avoidance. So they think, well, cognitive distancing means just kind of like distancing myself from my emotions or distancing myself from my thoughts. So I see people doing that online. They'll talk about Stoicism and turn it into what we call experiential avoidance, which is bad, unhealthy psychological. Don't do that. That's like Andrew Tate's advice. You know, like, if you follow that advice, it'll make you worse. Like, don't realize it's bad psychological advice. So it's important to really understand, like, what we mean by this. And it's hard because it's a subtle concept. But I think I'm surprised how many people are able to grasp it, you know, just with a little bit of coaching and some examples. So there's this subtlety of the concept can be confusing to some people. And the fact that it simplifies things and misses out certain factors. Those are some of the main disadvantages of this concept and technique.
Yeah, no, that's great. I wanted you to touch it because I know that it comes up in conversations. So just hear it from your voice. And listen, I know I got James and Sasha and Linda, and I would love to get to you, but I also want to get to this second breakout room. So I'm not ignoring you. We see you. I'm sorry. We come back on the second breakout and we have time, you are first in line. All right. Donald, we were going to put him in another conversation. And in this one, we're going to ask another question. And we're going to actually talk about premeditatio malorum, which was part of your presentation. You didn't quite get to, but it's an important thing. How about you set up this conversation or set up this question for the group?
All right. So I'll try and be very concise. So this means premeditation of adversity. It's a central technique in Stoicism. It's particularly prominent in Seneca, but in the other authors as well. And the Stoics tell us that every day we should repeatedly picture poverty, exile, death, disease, and all of the misfortunes that could potentially befall us in life. And that's pretty much the advice that they give us, and they talk about it quite a lot. Like, so this is similar to things that we would use in modern therapy, but the Stoics don't give us a lot of guidance about how to do this effectively. They just say that it's important and we should do a lot of it. So basically, premeditatio malorum involves visualizing as if it's happening to you right now, various types of misfortune. Now, there are obvious disadvantages to doing that, and there are obvious advantages to doing it. So I'd like people to kind of really think about it from both perspectives, and then we can have a bit of a discussion about it, hopefully, when they come back.
Yeah. So, and this idea, I think you might have said this, but premeditatio malorum is the idea. We sort of practice bad things happening to us without actually having them happen to us. We anticipate that they could, and we kind of say, well, what would I do if this bad thing happened to me?
Premeditate them.
That's right. You premeditate them, right? It's all built into the language, but in case your Latin's not great or whatever, it's bad stuff. Think contemplating bad things, contemplating adversity, premeditatio malorum. Okay, so we're going to do this again, just like we did it before. The rules are the same, my friends. You're going to be nice people. You're going to share your experiences. You're going to share what you think are the pros and cons of this premeditatio malorum. Inside groups, I have roughly 5 people inside of each one of these groups. Longest hair goes first. It's popcorn style after that, which means you pick the person that goes second, and the second picks the third, and the third picks the fourth. And all I need from you is some indication that you are okay with what's about to happen to you. Thumbs up, a smile, a nod, a dance move. You can wink at me. I will see you back here in 12 minutes. Poof, off you go. Hello, nice people. As you're popping back, we've got 45 seconds. Of course, you all saw the clock, I presume, as we pop you back.
This is the beginning of a conversation, Phil, like what you're doing today. It's kind of like a taster. It's what you're doing is planting seeds.
That's it, man. Yeah, I agree entirely. This is, I want you to go have more of these. I want you to realize you're not alone. I want you to be able to talk to folks. Jonathan, I see your hand is up. I'm just going to unmute you. What's on your mind? Or ask you to unmute yourself is the way that works. Let me press that button one more time.
I was gonna just respond to the breakout, but I can wait till everybody gets here.
Okay, yeah, give me a few seconds then. I thought maybe you had something hot on your mind, but it's okay. Give me a second.
I'll say hi to Donald. I'm in his Socrates class right now.
Oh, awesome. Nice to meet you.
I told you someone would want to live like Socrates. It sounded terrible to me. I said, who wants to, who wants to live like that? I bathe too much to live like Socrates. And of course, Donald points out, but Phil, you're already short and kind of round and, balding. So maybe you got that Socrates thing going.
I didn't say that. I said you don't wear shoes.
It might have been that exactly. Right. All right. First off, before I get to Jonathan here, who's going to be first on my list, and then Linda and whoever was in here last time, you'd have to find your way back to the thing. But super, put your hands up so I can find you. I'm going to keep my promise on that. But first off, you could see, you could hear, you had good conversations. Could you just give me a thumbs up maybe, or say yes in the chat? That worked. Give me another quick little thing. 12 minutes, was that too short, too long, or just right? Too short, too long, just right. Just put that in there, right in the thing. I see a lot of just rights, fun. Thank you. Just right, just right, just right, just right. Too short. I like too short. I could talk forever. Look at that. This is why I didn't put Donald in a group. No one else would get to talk. All right, Jonathan, I'm going to ask you to unmute one more time. Jonathan, reflect upon us for us about the questions. And you guys can help me out with one thing. And Jonathan just did a thing I want you to not do. And I'm not pointing him out, but I am pointing him out. But it's a very nice guy. Do not lower your hand for me, please. Let me lower your hand, because it shuffles you on my screen. And then I have trouble finding you later. So just you keep your hand up. Jonathan, talk to me about that.
Okay, yeah. There was just 2 of us in our breakout group. And, we had a good conversation about both the pros and the cons. And the pros were, being mentally prepared to deal with different challenges and setbacks that come up in a day or a situation that you may embrace. The cons were, I think we had a more interesting conversation about the cons when we were talking about my conversation partner, I believe is, I think, in computer programming. And he was talking about trying to create this software application where he wanted to eliminate the need for IT support or whatever support when someone's using it. And he said he couldn't do it. He said there was just too many. He tried to anticipate every kind of setback, and it got to a point where it was just too many to anticipate. And we sort of talked about how we can always come up with something else going wrong about a day or situation, and this could be one of the dangers of this exercise. But we sort of came to the conclusion that that's where you want to bring in other tools from the Stoic toolbox, and bringing in first being mindful that, oh, I'm ruminating here, I'm going too far and it's causing distress. Maybe stopping and bringing in the concept of, welcoming your fate and loving your fate, and remembering that some things aren't up to us, and maybe having confidence in yourself that I can deal with something that I can't think of right now, and just letting it go in the exercise, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, super. No, I think that's great. Thank you for that. I'm going to do one more of these real quick. Let's see, Linda is here, and I think Linda's the Linda from before, if I get this right.
That's correct. Yep. But so I'll just say real quick 2 things then on the premeditatio malorum, if I pronounce that right. Great conversations. The idea of anticipating the challenging situations, death being the ultimate, of course, was something that I think everyone agreed was a good thing, as long as you're in the right frame of mind, and as long as you're dealing with people that are in I guess a balanced frame of mind, if there's such a thing. Some people can have a addictive personality or be in the point in life where they're catastrophizing, and it may not be the right thing to do at that moment in time. And then just kind of going back to the earlier breakout room, we had a really interesting conversation about a lot of things, but evil, and how do you control your emotions when you're confronted with what you think is evil. And I think it was Glenn C. had mentioned that one of the Stoic teachings is that evil, there kind of is no such thing, perhaps, that it's basically evil is about the unexposed, the uneducated. And if we kind of frame ourselves to think of it that way, that it helps us deal with our own anger when confronted with what we would previously think of as evil. Anyway, so thank you for letting me speak about both.
Yeah, no, I love that. I just love this thinking. And like Donald pointed out, one of the things that we are here to do is to start conversation. So let me do something for you real quick. And because we're at time, and I said I'd get you in here on time, I'll get you out on time. I'm not in a hurry, but for some of you, I said I'd be started on 10 o'clock my time, and at 11:30. So we're going to do that bit. 2 things. Well, one thing first. If you'd like to keep this going with us, yes, please. I see people taking pictures. Please take pictures, send them to me. I would love to see what this looks like from your point of view, the gallery view kind of a thing. I think that's great fun, right? In fact, I'll do that one more time. Okay, so do that. If you are in, would like to keep the conversation going, please join us in this WhatsApp group if that's your kind of thing. I can explain WhatsApp in WhatsApp, but the point is it's not a Facebook group because I don't want to do that. But anyway, here we are inside this thing. You're welcome to join us if you'd like to be part of that. Love to have you. And then I am not in a hurry to get out of here, and I see a couple of hands up still, and we'll do that. But I always do one little thing that's just kind of my little signature element here, which is I ask everybody to unmute and thank Donald for his presentation today and his time with us. So I give everybody the amazing, incredible power to unmute themselves. I'm going to count you down, and we're going to all say thank you to Donald together. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
Thank you, Donald.
Thank you,
Donald.
Donald.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you very much for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Phil, thank you to you as well.
Well,
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Phil.
Phil.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. Yes.
Thank you, Phil.
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 Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Phil
Phil.
and Don.
Yes, thanks, Phil.
Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.